No one was meant to survive what Hank Caldwell saw that morning, and the fact that someone had was the first thing that unsettled him. His horse slowed before he did, hooves dragging as if the animal sensed what waited ahead. Hank followed the line of the road with half a mind, thinking of fence repairs and the long ride home, until a shape by the fallen cottonwood pulled his attention sharp and sudden. At first, it looked like discarded cloth caught in branches. Then it moved. A woman was tied to the tree, not hidden, not dragged into brush or shadows. She was placed where anyone passing would see her, the rope clean and pale against the bark, wrapped tight around her wrists and the trunk. Her dress was dusty but intact, her boots still on. This was not the work of chaos. It was arranged. Hank dismounted slowly. The sound of his boots on dirt seemed too loud in the open air. As he stepped closer, he saw her face, pale, drawn, but steady. She didn't call out. She didn't plead. She watched him with a look that held more resignation than fear, like someone waiting for a verdict already decided. Then he noticed her belly. It sat heavy beneath the fabric, unmistakable even at a distance. The sight tightened something in his chest. This was not just cruelty. This was a message. "It's all right," Hank said, though he wasn't sure who the words were for. Himself, maybe. "I'll get you loose." Her eyes flicked past him, not to his knife or his hands, but down the road, toward the wide stretch of land that rose gentle and green in the distance. Land everyone in the county knew belonged to Caleb Mercer. Hank cut the rope. It fell away too easily, confirming what his eyes already knew. It was new, bought for this purpose alone. When her wrists came free, she swayed but did not fall. Hank reached out, then stopped himself. He didn't know the rules of her fear yet. "You can sit," he offered, nodding to a flat rock nearby. She shook her head once. "If I sit, I won't get back up." Her voice was quiet, steady in a way that told him she had learned not to waste words. Hank respected that. He handed her his canteen instead. She drank carefully, like every swallow mattered. "What's your name?" he asked. "Evelyn." He waited, giving her space to say more if she chose. She didn't. Silence settled between them, thick and telling. Hank looked again at the tree, the rope marks, the open stretch of road. Anyone could have seen her like this. A ranch hand, a preacher, a child riding fence. That was the point. Whoever did this wanted her seen, judged, remembered. "This wasn't an accident," Hank said quietly. "No," Evelyn replied. "It never is." That was when he understood the trap he'd stepped into. This wasn't just about freeing someone tied to a tree. This was about being made part of a story someone else had started, one written in daylight so no one could pretend they hadn't noticed. Hank had lived alone long enough to know when to mind his own business. He knew how power worked in places like this, how it smiled, how it signed papers, how it let other people do the looking away. Caleb Mercer was not a man you crossed without consequence. Everyone knew that too. He could untie her, point her down the road, and ride on. He could tell himself he'd done enough. But Evelyn didn't move toward the road. She stood there, hands raw, shoulders straight, waiting, not asking. Waiting to see what kind of man he was going to be. "Can you ride?" Hank asked. She hesitated, then nodded once. "Then you're coming with me," he said. Not loud, not brave, just certain enough that he surprised himself. Her eyes lifted to his, something cautious breaking through the stillness. "He'll come looking. I know. He'll say it's lawful. I know that too." The wind moved through the cottonwood leaves, soft and indifferent. Hank turned his horse toward home, feeling the weight of the choice settle in his bones. This was how trouble started. Not with shouting or fury, but with one quiet refusal to pretend that what was done in the open could somehow be right. As they rode away, Hank glanced back once. The fallen tree stood empty now, but the mark remained. Whatever had been intended, there had failed. That failure, Hank knew, would not be forgiven. Hank's ranch sat far enough from town that most people passed it by without reason, and that distance was what made it feel safe at first. The house was plain, the kind built for use, not for show. A low fence circled the yard, and the corral creaked softly in the wind. When Hank helped Evelyn down from the horse, the quiet felt almost kind. She stood still for a moment, taking it in. The open land, the worn porch, no eyes on her except his. "You can stay here tonight," Hank said, "as long as you need." Evelyn nodded, though she didn't relax. Her hands stayed close to her sides, fingers stiff, as if she expected the rope to still be there. Hank noticed and felt a dull anger rise, slow and heavy. He pushed it down. Anger was easy. Sense was harder. Inside, he gave her water, then bread and stew. She ate carefully, not rushed, but with purpose. When she finished, she rested one hand on her belly without thinking. Only then did she seem to realize she'd done it, and she pulled her hand away. "He doesn't like people seeing that," she said quietly. Hank didn't ask who she meant. He only nodded and showed her the small room off the main hall. It had a bed, a chair, and a single window that faced the yard. "You'll be safe here," he said, though the words felt thin even as he spoke them. That night, Hank didn't sleep much. He sat at the table with a lamp turned low, listening. The land had its own sounds. Crickets, distant cattle, the soft shift of wood as the house settled. He knew those sounds well. What he listened for were the ones that didn't belong. Near midnight, his horse lifted its head in the corral and let out a low sound. Hank stood and moved to the window. Far off, near the fence line, a shape passed slowly along the road. Then another. Riders, keeping their distance, not calling out, not stopping. They wanted him to see them. The next morning brought no relief. Hank found fresh tracks near the outer fence, careful ones, like whoever made them didn't want to be noticed, but didn't mind being discovered either. When he turned back toward the house, Evelyn was standing on the porch. "They've started," she said. "Started what?" "Letting you know." Later that day, a man Hank barely recognized rode up and stopped short of the gate. He didn't dismount. He smiled, polite and thin. "Mr. Caldwell," the man said. "Just passing through. Thought I'd say hello." Hank stepped forward but didn't open the gate. "That so?" The man nodded. "Word travels fast. Folks are talking about you taking in a married woman. Some might misunderstand." Evelyn stood behind Hank, just inside the doorway. She didn't speak. The man glanced past Hank, then back again. "Mr. Mercer would prefer this handled calmly. He's a reasonable man. He values order." "Then he can come talk himself," Hank replied. The man smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. "No need for that. Just thought you should know. Papers will be coming." He tipped his hat and rode off. By evening, Hank understood the shape of the pressure. No shouting, no threats spoken out loud. Just visits, looks, riders slowing on the road. A quiet tightening around his place, like a rope being drawn careful and steady. Evelyn watched it all from the porch, her face unreadable. "They won't rush," she said. "They never do. They wait for you to get tired." Hank leaned against the post beside her. "I've been tired before." She almost smiled at that, but it faded quickly. "They'll say I belong to him. They'll say it's lawful." "And what do you say?" Hank asked. She looked out across the land. "I say I'm a person." That night, the riders came closer than before. One stopped near the corral, long enough for Hank to hear the leather creak and the quiet snort of a horse. Still no words. Still no open trouble. Hank stayed awake until dawn, knowing now there was no turning back. Offering shelter had been the easy part. Keeping it would cost more. And somewhere beyond the fence, someone was counting on that cost, breaking him first. Town looked the same as it always had, but Hank felt the difference the moment he rode in. Doors stayed open a little longer than usual. Conversations slowed when he passed. People watched him the way they watched weather they didn't like but didn't dare argue with. Evelyn sat straight in the wagon seat beside him, hands folded, eyes forward. She wore a borrowed coat from Hank's house, plain and clean. Nothing about her looked improper, yet Hank could feel the judgment already forming, shaped by rumor instead of fact. They stopped first at the doctor's office. The visit was quiet and brief. The doctor spoke softly, careful with every word, as if even kindness needed approval. When they stepped back onto the street, a man waited near the hitching post. Caleb Mercer looked smaller than Hank expected. Neat coat, polished boots, a face practiced in calm. He smiled as if they were meeting by chance. "Hank Caldwell," Mercer said warmly. "I was hoping we'd talk." Hank nodded once. "Seems we are." Mercer's eyes moved to Evelyn, then back to Hank. "Evelyn, you've caused quite a stir. People worry when a woman wanders off in such a condition." "I didn't wander," she said. Mercer didn't react. "Of course not. That was poorly phrased. What matters is that you're returned safely. There are proper ways to handle private matters." He held out a folded set of papers. "These explain everything." Hank didn't take them. "I can read later." Mercer's smile tightened but stayed in place. "I'd prefer now. It saves time, saves embarrassment." A deputy stood nearby, pretending to adjust his belt. Two men lingered by the store, listening without looking like they were listening. The street felt narrow all at once. Mercer cleared his throat. "The law is clear. A husband has rights. Responsibilities too, of course. But order matters." Evelyn's hand moved to her belly again, slow and protective. "What about what I want?" Mercer looked at her as one might look at a child who didn't understand the world yet. Want is not the same as what's right. That was when the memory hit Hank, sharp and unwelcome. His wife years ago, standing in a doorway with a packed bag, asking him not for permission but for understanding. And him, tired and proud, talking about what made sense instead of what was fair. She had left anyway, never came back. The regret had stayed. Hank felt it now, heavy and familiar. This was the same moment, wearing a different face. "You talk like the law settles everything," Hank said. "But I saw what was done to her." Mercer's voice stayed calm. "You saw what you think you saw. Appearances can be misleading." "Not when they're meant to be seen," Hank replied. For the first time, Mercer's eyes hardened. "Careful. You're a decent man. Don't confuse yourself by stepping into matters beyond you." The deputy shifted closer. "Mr. Caldwell, maybe it's best to let the paperwork speak." Hank looked at the papers now. Clean, proper, stamped and signed. They carried weight, the kind that bent people without touching them. Evelyn stepped forward before Hank could answer. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "If the law says I must go with him, then I want it said out loud, in front of everyone." A murmur ran through the street. Mercer hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. "There's no need for a scene," he said gently. "That's what you said before," Evelyn replied. Hank felt the pull then, the easy path. Hand her over. Let the town handle it. Let paper win. It would cost him nothing but a few uneasy nights. Instead, he spoke. "We'll take this to the courthouse steps. Today." Mercer studied him, weighing the shift. "Very well. I admire your concern, truly. Just remember who benefits from dragging this into the open." As Mercer turned away, the smile returned, practiced and sure. But something had changed. People were watching now, really watching. Not just the papers, not just the name. As Hank followed with Evelyn, he knew the danger had grown. Not because Mercer was angry, but because he was confident. Confident the system would close ranks. Confident Hank would blink first. Hank didn't know how this would end. He only knew that staying silent now would mean living with the same regret twice, and that was a cost he was no longer willing to pay. By the next morning, Hank understood that talking would get them nowhere. Words could be bent. Papers could be framed. If this was going to hold, it would have to be built on things that could be pointed at, counted, and repeated without changing shape. He started at the general store. The bell over the door rang as he stepped inside, and the sound felt louder than usual. The owner looked up, then away, then back again. He was a careful man, the kind who measured every customer twice. "I need to ask you something," Hank said. The owner wiped his hands on his apron. "If it's about Mercer, I don't want trouble." "I'm not asking for opinions," Hank replied. "Just facts." That seemed to help. The man hesitated, then reached beneath the counter and pulled out a small ledger. He flipped pages slowly. "2 days before you found her," he said, keeping his voice low. "Someone bought new rope, paid cash, said it was for fencing." "Who?" Hank asked. The owner didn't answer right away. Then he looked up. "Mercer's stable hand. I know him." Hank nodded. He thanked the man and left without pressing further. Pushing too hard made people close. Next was the livery stable. A boy was sweeping near the stalls, glancing toward the street every few seconds. Hank waited until the place was empty before speaking. "You handle the horses here?" Hank asked. The boy shrugged. "Most days." "Did Mercer bring one in last week, late?" The boy's broom slowed. "Maybe." Hank didn't rush him. "I'm not asking you to take sides." After a long moment, the boy nodded. "He came back just before dawn. Mud on the horse's legs. Rope marks on the saddle." "Did he say where he'd been?" The boy shook his head. "Didn't have to." Hank thanked him too. By afternoon, word had spread that Hank was asking questions. Riders appeared again near his ranch that night, closer than before. One dismounted near the fence and leaned there, not hiding, just waiting. Hank stepped onto the porch. "You need something?" The man smiled thinly. "Just making sure everything's all right." Hank met his gaze. "It is." The man stayed a moment longer, then walked back to his horse. No threats, no raised voices, but the message was clear. Stop. Inside, Evelyn watched Hank set the ledger notes on the table. "They're tightening," she said. "So are we," Hank replied. The next day, he spoke to a neighbor who lived near the road where the tree had fallen. The man had seen a wagon stop there early one morning. Hadn't thought much of it at the time. Thought even less of it now. "I don't want my name used," the neighbor said. "You won't have to speak," Hank replied. "Just remember what you saw." By the third day, Hank felt the weight of being watched everywhere. The ranch no longer felt quiet. It felt measured. That night, Evelyn woke from a restless sleep and sat at the table with him. "You don't have to do this," she said. "Not all the way." Hank looked at her. "If I stop now, nothing changes." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll stand too." The pressure sharpened after that. A fence post was loosened. A gate left open. Small things meant to wear him down. Hank fixed what he could and wrote down the rest. What surprised him most was how the town began to shift. Not loudly, not all at once. But the store owner stopped looking away. The stable boy nodded when Hank passed. People were watching Mercer now, measuring him the way they measured everyone else. By the end of the week, Hank had a simple line of truth. New rope, a late ride, a stopped wagon. Nothing dramatic, nothing exaggerated. Just enough to show that what happened by that tree had been planned. And that was what made it dangerous. Mercer wasn't angry yet. That worried Hank more than anything. A man who still believed he was untouchable hadn't begun to fight. As Hank prepared for the coming day, he understood the risk clearly. Proof didn't guarantee justice. It only removed excuses. What happened next would depend on who was willing to speak when it mattered, and who would still hide behind quiet, lawful words. By the time the courthouse steps filled, the town had already chosen to watch. People stood in loose lines, not crowding, not hiding either. This was not a spectacle announced in advance. It was something that had pulled them in one by one, drawn by rumor, by curiosity, by the quiet sense that something important was about to be said out loud. Hank stood a step back from Evelyn. He did that on purpose. This was not his moment to lead. It was his moment to stay. Evelyn moved forward when the sheriff called for order. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. Her hands rested at her sides, steady now, as if the days of being watched had taught her how to stand without shrinking. Caleb Mercer arrived with confidence. His coat was clean. His papers were neatly folded. He greeted the sheriff with a polite nod, as if this were a routine matter already settled. "Let's handle this properly," Mercer said. "There's no reason for confusion." The sheriff looked at the papers, then at Evelyn. "Mrs. Mercer," he said carefully, "your husband claims you left his care unlawfully." Evelyn took a breath. When she spoke, the sound carried farther than she expected. "I didn't leave. I was left." A murmur passed through the crowd. Mercer smiled faintly. "That's an emotional way to describe a misunderstanding." Hank stepped forward then, just enough. "There's proof," he said, "and witnesses." Mercer turned to him, still calm. "You've done enough. Let the law finish this." The sheriff hesitated. "We'll hear it." Hank spoke plainly. No speeches, no anger. He told them about the rope, newly bought, the ledger from the store, the stable boy who saw the horse return before dawn, the neighbor who saw the wagon stop by the fallen tree. Each piece alone seemed small. Together they formed a line that pointed in only one direction. Mercer's smile faded, just a little. "Circumstantial," he said. "None of this proves intent." Evelyn stepped forward again. "Then let me." She turned to the crowd. "I was placed there so I would be seen, so I would be judged, so I would come back quiet." Mercer shook his head. "This is not appropriate." She didn't look at him. "I was told I belonged to him, that the law agreed." The sheriff glanced at Mercer. "Did you order her restrained?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "That's a private matter." That was when he reached for her. It wasn't fast, it wasn't violent. It was instinct, practiced and sure, a hand closing around her arm as if claiming what was his. Evelyn pulled back. The movement was sharp enough that everyone saw it. The crowd went still. "Don't," she said. Mercer tightened his grip without thinking. "Come with me." The sound that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was the sound of certainty breaking. The sheriff stepped forward. So did two men from the crowd. Mercer released her hand, suddenly aware of where he was. The sheriff spoke firmly. "That's enough." Evelyn stood free now. Her arm marked, but her voice steady. "Hi, that is who he is," she said. "That is what the papers don't show." Mercer looked around, searching for support that didn't come. The law had given him space before. Now it gave him distance. The sheriff folded the papers and handed them back. "This will be reviewed," he said, publicly. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't shout. They simply stayed, watching Mercer walk away smaller than when he arrived. Hank exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized how long he'd been holding his breath. Evelyn turned to him. "You didn't speak for me," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. "You didn't need me to." As people drifted away, the town felt different. Not healed, not fixed, but awake. Hank watched Evelyn walk down the steps on her own, her pace unhurried, her head high. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Freedom never was. But it was hers. And as the courthouse emptied and the dust settled, one truth remained, quiet and lasting. Justice didn't arrive on paper that day. It arrived because someone refused to look away, and someone else finally spoke. That was how change began, and it only ever began that way.